me, your man, Louie Tee. Welcome to the 2019 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series, where your man Louie Tee aims to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2019 NFL Draft using our baseball grading scale. Single, double, triple, home run. There are no strikeouts here in the Draft Wrap-Up Series, as you cannot tell how these players are going to pan out, and I don't want to discount any of these young men before they get their chance in the National Football League. And so, we'll get a score for each and every single player selected in said team's draft. We'll apply bonuses when necessary, get an aggregate score, divide by the number of picks, which will yield us an overall grade for that team's draft. We'll then move on to the next team in the series picked by you. That's right, you, the viewer, are in total control, as this is the You Pick format. Simply be the first to leave a comment in the comment section of this and future videos in this series stating two things: the phrase next and the team you'd like to see next. Some examples would be Ravens next, Baltimore next, Ravens. You get where I'm going with this. As a matter of fact, the next team up in the series is none other than the Baltimore Ravens. Life without Ozzie. This is the first year that Ozzie Newsome hasn't been in control of the Ravens draft in quite some time. I can't even remember the last time he wasn't in control of the Ravens draft. It's been that long. And so Eric DeCosta now takes over as the lead guy in Baltimore. And look, this is a team that I think overachieved a season ago. I don't know if a lot of you out there felt the same way, but after seeing how this team was able to battle back, remember, they started off the season a little rough, especially after the Joe Flacco injury. They looked like they were dead in the water at around 3-5. They turned it up, won a bunch of games. Lamar Jackson comes in. They changed the entire landscape of their offense and the way they attack teams. They start running the football down teams' throats, playing complementary defense, and all of a sudden, they win the AFC North out of nowhere. And so you look at this Ravens football team now and you say, all right, so what do you do for an encore? Are you going to dedicate yourself to the style of play that got you to the postseason last year? Or are you going to try to develop Lamar Jackson into a pocket passer right now? The answer is we're going to take Lamar Jackson as is, and we're going to develop a team around him that can be successful. So what does that mean? Speed, and more speed on this football team from an offensive standpoint. Lamar Jackson is as fast as you're going to find in the NFL at the quarterback position. So time to add complementary pieces around him that can say the same. They did it at the running back position. They did it at the receiver position. In this draft, we already know the Ravens stay loaded at the tight end position. So when you look around at what they've been able to do now with this draft and all the things that they already had with the table set as is, this Ravens team looks eerily similar to a team that we saw win big in Baltimore in the early 2000s. And so this is a scary bunch, and this is going to be one of my favorite teams to watch in 2019, not just because of Lamar Jackson and his dynamic ability with the football in his hands, but just because of all of the team speed offensively that they've added with this draft. It's going to be electrifying to see some of these guys all on the field at one time and the endless possibilities that will be provided to the Ravens because of all of the speed that they possess now if these guys are healthy. And so this is a hell of a draft. Eric DeCosta's first draft as Ravens general manager, I must say, he lit it up. This is one hell of a draft. And it's going to probably end up being one of the higher rated drafts here on the Draft Wrap-Up Series when it's all said and done. I still don't think anyone's going to beat the draft of the Denver Broncos. But I tell you what, this Ravens draft here is going to be one that's going to be tough to beat as well after you see the scores that they were able to accumulate with the players selected in rounds 1 through 7. So 8-player draft for the Ravens. I'll give you their needs going into the draft here in a second, but let's jump into this draft where we start with the 25th overall selection in the first round. Oklahoma wide receiver Hollywood Marquise Hollywood Brown is the selection to get this Ravens draft underway. So, obviously, if you've been watching my channel for any amount of time, then you know I've already broken down Hollywood Brown and his film, and I've told you what I think about this guy. He was my number 1 rated wide receiver on the board in this entire draft, so that just gives you a little bit of perspective as to how I feel about this guy and what he brings to the table. You couple him with the kind of dynamic speed that Lamar Jackson possesses, and it's just so many dominant. Because again, he's not just a receiver. You saw the multitude of ways he can be used at Oklahoma, and he can even be used even more so at the next level. This guy's going to be a problem. He just has to stay healthy. If he is in fact healthy, this is a guy that can change the game. And it's something that the Ravens have lacked. John Brown offered them a little bit of that, which is dynamic, field-changing speed. They lacked that over the last couple of years. John Brown brought a little bit of that to the table last year. This guy's going to bring even more of it to the field this year. And you're hoping that he's not like his cousin, Antonio Brown, but is more level-headed and less of a head case on and off the field. But that being said, you traded back 3 spots and picked up a 4th and a 6th from the Philadelphia Eagles in doing so. And you still get probably what was going to be your pick at 22 anyway. So you trade back 3 spots. You pick up the same, you pick up a 4th and a 6th and get the same guy that you probably were going to select 3 picks prior. I'd say it was a hell of a get by the Baltimore Ravens in their first selection in the 2019 NFL Draft. You look at the Ravens' needs. Let's go ahead and take wide receiver off the board of needs for the Ravens. And as you can see in front of you are the needs that I deemed needs for the Ravens heading into the draft. Again, what I deem needs and what you deem needs may be 2 totally different things. But this is the way that I saw this Ravens team set up and how I thought the needs were in order in terms of importance going into this draft. And so wide receiver to me was the biggest need. You got rid of Michael Crabtree. You got rid of John Brown. All that was really left is Willie Snead from last year's team in terms of receiver and production. And so you needed to really bolster that group. There wasn't much there. That cupboard was pretty much bare. And so receiver was a big need for me, the biggest of them all. Edge rusher. No more Terrell Suggs. No more Sedarius Smith, both gone in free agency. Obviously, edge rusher was a big concern. Now, you addressed some of that after the draft was over, going out and getting a guy like Shane Ray on a 1-year deal. And I felt like that was a hell of a move in itself because we don't know what Shane Ray has to offer. But if there's anything left, if he can stay healthy, we knew that Shane Ray was an elite pass rusher coming into the league. And if he can stay healthy and get back to some of that, he's still a relatively young guy. There could be a lot left in that tank. And if so, you will be the beneficiaries of that. So, but you needed edge rusher, and you took care of that in this draft as well. Offensive line, I just look at that line as a whole. You just need to continue to build depth, especially on the interior of this offensive line. I don't want to see Jermaine Illuminor in at guard anymore. I don't want you to have to tap into some depth that you don't necessarily trust. And so Marshall Yanda is up there. What is he, 33, 34 years old now? I mean, at some point, he's going to conk out on you. You just need to be putting yourself in a position that you have guys that you can trust. And so I thought you needed some interior offensive line depth, if nothing else, in this draft. Linebacker, obviously you lose C.J. Mosley. I think you feel like you're good. You love Patrick Owasso. I think you really feel good about Kenny Young out of UCLA. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I thought that linebacker was something that you needed to address. Maybe you feel good about that position, but you did not select a linebacker. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Running back, I think you have some really good pieces at running back, especially when healthy, but none of them provide you with the dynamic speed, the home run threat speed that complements a guy like Lamar Jackson. You took care of that in this draft as well. And then cornerback, both of your starting corners will start the season off at 30 or older. And so, again, you've got a bunch of stuff at corner. I should take that back. One of your corners is going to start out the season at 30 years old or older. Jimmy Smith and Brandon Carr, both 30 or above. Obviously, you've got the Alabama corner that is playing his ass off. And so that's a young guy that you feel like you can build around at the cornerback position, but you still need more depth. You want more guys that you can trust. You're one Jimmy Smith ankle injury and one Brandon Carr groin injury away from saying, oh shit, what are we going to do at cornerback? So you don't want to put yourself in a position where Marlon Humphrey goes down with a strained calf muscle and he's out for 4 weeks and you got nothing because you know Jimmy's good for a 4-week stretch of not playing. So you just want to be able to have the depth necessary to withstand some of those bumps and bruises that are going to come throughout the course of an NFL season. And so I thought cornerback was another position you needed to address. But that being said, I love this pick. You already know what I think of this pick. First round, 25th overall selection, wide receiver out of Oklahoma, Hollywood Brown, for me, is...
Hits one high! Hits it deep! It is out of here!
So again, if you're looking for a thorough breakdown of Hollywood Brown, you know what to do. Go check out the Louie Tee Network, which you should already be checking out. If you're watching this video, then you're on the Louie Tee Network. Just go into my archives, find, or the playlist section, find the Draft Prospects 101 series from 2019, and you'll find the video for all of the prospects I was able to get to prior to the draft, Marquise Brown being one of them. The comp for Marquise Brown, in case you haven't watched that video, is Deshaun Jackson. This is an easy comp. Similar body type, similar types of speed, similar type of ability. I think this guy has immense potential at the next level to tear shit up, and they get their man in the first round and trade back in doing so. I think it's a wonderful selection to kick off this Ravens draft as we go to their next pick. No second rounder here, but they get a pick in the third round that was a big-time need. 85th overall, edge rusher out of Louisiana Tech, Jalen Ferguson is the selection. So here's another guy that I was able to get to prior to the draft. So I'm not going to do a thorough breakdown of him here. I've already done that. You know how I feel about Jalen Ferguson. I will say this. A lot of people were turned off by Jalen Ferguson's pro day because remember, he couldn't be at the combine because of the rule that has been implemented that if you have been charged with a misdemeanor or a felony, a serious misdemeanor, but more than that, a felony of any kind. And he had a simple assault at a McDonald's in his freshman year on campus that ended up prohibiting him from being invited to the combine. Nonetheless, his pro day was not impressive, and a lot of teams were turned off by some of the times, including his short shuttle, which was just an abomination. So it really did kind of calm down what was a building momentum for Jalen Ferguson to potentially end up being in the first round. Instead, he falls to the third round. But the tape doesn't lie, and I think this guy, if there was ever a pick that screamed Baltimore Raven to me, it's this guy right here in the third round. He looks like a Raven. He's physical, fits the Ravens profile. I think this is a great pickup for the Baltimore Ravens, and we're going to go ahead and take this off of the board for the Ravens as well. No more edge rusher as a need, as you've taken care of that here in the third round with Jalen Ferguson, a guy that I think is going to come in. You don't set the NCAA record for most career sacks in a career over the likes of guys like Reggie White and guys of that nature, Barrett, or all of the guys in NCAA history that have lit up the record books. This guy surpassed them all. And so you can't tell me he can't get to the quarterback. I refuse to buy that notion. And yes, the times were alarming, all right, that he put up. And I talked about them during the breakdown. So if you're looking for all of that information, go to my breakdown of Jalen Ferguson. I'm not going to do that here. But again, I think this guy is not only capable, but going to be a force for this Ravens defense. His comp for me, Lamar Woodley, has the same type of body type as Woodley. Has that same kind of ability to be physical at the point of attack, drive guys back, but also has just enough quickness off the edge to be a problem in that department as well. So Lamar Woodley is my comp for a guy like Jalen Ferguson here in the third round, 85th overall selection, edge rusher out of La Tech for the Ravens. Jalen Ferguson for me is... So we move on to the next pick for the Ravens, and they double down in the third round on picks, and they double down on the receiver position with their second wide receiver taken in the first three picks of their draft, the first time the Ravens have ever done so. And again, wide receiver was a big need coming into the draft, and they address it here again, third round, 93rd overall pick. Wide receiver out of Notre Dame, Myles Boykin is the selection. So Myles Boykin, 6'4", 220 pounds, a guy that I'm very familiar with. I'm a Notre Dame Fighting Irish fan, so I've watched his career very closely. I've watched him grow from a guy that was seldomly used in 2017 and ended up being the hero of the Citrus Bowl game versus LSU, making a one-handed grab and essentially scoring the game-winning touchdown and being the game's MVP, to a breakout season in 2018 where he was really the go-to receiver for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish as they made it to the playoffs in the first time in the school's history since the new playoff format has been implemented. And so Myles Boykin, to me, is ascending right now. He's an ascending football player, and I think his best football is still yet ahead of him. And when you look at what he brings to the table, the Ravens have a bunch of guys that are tall. They have a bunch of guys that are, well, they have a guy that is fast now. Now they have one in one body, and that's something that they haven't been able to say in previous years is, hey, we got a guy that's not only fast, and we not only have a guy that's tall, we got a guy that's tall and fast. And that's what Myles Boykin brings to the table. And you traded from 102 up to 93 to get him. So you really valued this guy and felt like he was going to be a big get for you in this draft. And you swap third rounders and you give up 2 6-rounders in the process to come up and get Myles Boykin. So you really felt good about Myles Boykin, and you felt like you needed to come up and get him before someone else did. So you look at this guy, and he blew me away. Watching him at Notre Dame, I knew he could run. I knew he ate up a ton of grass quickly with his huge strides, but never in my wildest dreams did I think he was going to test the way that he did at the Combine. I just didn't see some of these things show up on game day. Not to say that they don't, but I would have never told you that he was a 4'4", 240 guy. I mean, obviously that's build-up speed with him. He's not like your first round pick in Hollywood Brown where he takes 3 steps and he's at full speed and you can't catch him. This is a guy that needs 5 steps to get up to full speed. But once he opens up those strides, he's going to be hard to catch. And so the 4.42 is straight line speed. 33-inch arms with a 6'4" frame. Okay, what that says to me, massive catch radius for a guy like Lamar Jackson, who isn't always the most accurate. The bigger the target, the bigger the catch radius, the better for a guy like Lamar Jackson. 43.5-inch vert. Never, ever would have thought that this guy, again, he's already 6'4". He's already got 33-inch arms, and you're telling me he can get up 43.5 inches? That is insane. That just makes the catch radius even wider and cast an even bigger net for Lamar Jackson to get him the football. And then an 11.6 broad, which just continues to show off the explosiveness. That was the third best time in Combine history, or excuse me, third best jump in Combine history in terms of the broad jump. That's insane. Those are insane numbers. This guy tore the Combine to shreds, raised his draft stock, and ended up being a third-round pick here for the Ravens. I'll quickly give you a recap of what I think of Myles Boykin. A long-striding, athletically gifted wide receiver that can go up and get the football in 50-50 situations. Did see him do that quite a bit at Notre Dame. Still inconsistent with his hands at times and really needs to fine-tune getting in and out of breaks, as well as allowing cornerbacks to jam and crowd him at the line of scrimmage. For as big as he is, he's not a guy that is adept at getting guys off of him. He's got to be better at that, because with his size and his ability to run, if he can win at the line of scrimmage, he can put guys on his back hip and then take off. He could be a real problem, and this is where the coaching staff comes in. They've got to fine-tune him. He's a little rough around the edges. They've got to smooth those edges out. If they can do that with Myles Boykin, he could be a big-time wide receiver in this league and be one of the better ones in the AFC North Division when it's all said and done. But the talent here is undeniable, and even better, he's only scratching the surface of what he can be at the next level. Boykin is definitely an ascending player. And so I've said as much. I think very highly of him, and this isn't a biased Notre Dame opinion. I'd tell you if I thought a guy wasn't good enough to get the job done. I see Myles Boykin going in the right direction. I told you his trajectory is upward right now, and I feel really good about this selection, not only for the Ravens, but for Myles Boykin. I think this is a really good spot for him where he landed, and not a lot of pressure on him to come in and be the guy. They've got so many weapons on this offense now. He's just going to be a cog in the machine. He's not going to be the guy driving the machine. And so really like this spot for Myles Boykin. Think he's going to flourish in this Ravens offense. And I love this pick. And the comp for him, for me, is Devin Funchess. Remember, when Funchess came out of Michigan, he made the transition from tight end to wide receiver. He ran a sub 4.5 at his pro day. He is a big guy, 6'3", 6'4", long wingspan, could go up and get the football. Funchess had a 42-inch vertical, 40-inch vertical, something like that. So very comparable numbers for the two. And Funchess has been a very quality NFL wide receiver, and I think Myles Boykin can do the same here in the third round, 93rd overall selection, wide receiver out of Notre Dame. Myles Boykin, for me, is so we move on to the fourth round, 113th overall selection, running back out of Oklahoma State. Justice Hill is the selection. One of the fastest backs in this draft. I talked about this on my podcast numerous times, Louie Tee Network podcast. For those of you unfamiliar, check it out. It's available on Stitcher, Google Music Play, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, and of course the website LouieTeeNetwork.net. Louie Tee Network podcast. Check it out. It's great stuff. I talked about on the podcast, I gave you my running backs ranking up there, and I talked about these running backs, and I said, look, the running back position, not a lot of speedsters in this draft. A lot of good football players, not a lot of guys that can pick them up and put them down really, really fast. This guy was one of the few, and not only could he pick them up and put them down really, really fast, he was a blazer running a 4.4 flat. So this is a guy that could definitely run, and it's something the Ravens have lacked at the running back position. They haven't had a guy, even back to the Ray Rice days, they haven't had a guy with this kind of speed that was a home run threat every time he touched the rock. They haven't had this in Baltimore in quite some time, if at all. So this is something different for the Ravens here. And again, it was all about speed in this draft, and they're adding more of it on the offensive side of the football. And again, I can't wait to see a formation that features Lamar Jackson, Justice Hill, who is going to be playing in an offense that suits him so well. He played in a read option type of offense in college at Oklahoma State. A lot of gun runs, a lot of pistol, a lot of different things that he's going to be able to assimilate well to with this Ravens team, because they're running a lot of same concepts, a lot of RPOs and things of that nature with Lamar Jackson. So this is a really good fit for Justice Hill. I think he was the best zone run blocking running back in this draft. The Ravens don't run a ton of zone, but then now that you're in these gun runs and you're in the read option, and it gives him a chance to read the field, I think you're going to get a lot of situations where this guy's going to have space to operate. And the most dangerous thing about Justice Hill is when you give him a crease, this guy can take it the distance, again, with that 4.4 speed. I've already broken him down in my Draft Prospects 101 series, so I'm not going to do that here. But I absolutely love this pick. And to put him on the field with Lamar Jackson, Marquise Brown, Myles Boykin, and having Justice Hill on the field, you're talking about three guys, sub 4.43s, that are just absolute blazers, two of which are sub 4.3s, maybe even three of these guys, because I think Lamar is probably a sub 4.4 guy. This is insane. This is insane how much speed the Ravens can put on the field at once. I'm not a Madden player anymore, but if I were still playing Madden, back in my day when we would play Madden, this would be a dream team. This would be a dream scenario. Lamar Jackson at quarterback, which would make you feel like Michael Vick all over again for those of you old like myself who played Madden back in the heyday. And with Warwick Dunn on the team, that was about 95 speed or so. And you put Vick back there, and Vick was every bit of 98, 99, 97 speed. And then now, the one thing the Falcons really didn't have was elite receiver speed. You add in a guy like Marquise Brown, who's probably going to be every bit of a 96, 97, 98 speed. And you add in Myles Boykin, who's going to be a 95, 96 speed himself. All that speed, I mean, I don't know how Madden is played anymore, but that would have been a death lineup. That would have been like the Hampton 5 for the Golden State Warriors. That would have been like the Hampton 5 on Madden. I mean, that's a death lineup right there. You wouldn't have been able to stop that with all that speed, and I can't wait to watch it unfold on the field. But in any event, I absolutely love this pick, as I just mentioned. Adding more speed. Ingram comes in, and he's going to be the thunder, and here is your lightning here in the third round or fourth round, 113th overall selection, running back out of Oklahoma State. Justice Hill, for me, obviously is off the board now. And so I take the running back position off the board. And so this is what. So all of this offensive weaponry, all of this talent, all of these skill guys, you got to be able to block for them. And so I talked about the Ravens needing to add more offensive line depth. That's what they do here in the fourth round. 123rd pick overall, offensive lineman out of Oklahoma. Ben Powers is the selection. So let's go ahead and take offensive line off the board real quick as the Ravens select offensive guard Ben Powers out of Oklahoma. So if you've noticed thus far, a lot of Big 12 players. It seems like the scouts were heavy in the Big 12. They liked a lot of what they saw in that conference. Your first 5 picks, 3 of which are out of the Big 12, 2 of which are out of Oklahoma, the other Oklahoma State. So there's something about Oklahoma in general that they seem to have really liked with this staff and this scouting group, because the Ravens went heavy in the Big 12 early on. But nonetheless, Ben Powers, 6'4", 307 pounds, 34-inch arms out of Oklahoma. That was a very talented and experienced offensive line at Oklahoma in 2018. I think 3 out of the 5 guys, maybe even 4 of them, Drew Samia, Ben Powers, and obviously Cody Ford, all drafted. I may be missing one, but I think that was the extent of them. The left tackle might have been drafted as well. To me, he was the lesser of that group, though. In any event, physical, no-nonsense offensive guard with experience on an experienced Oklahoma offensive line that plays the game with the chip on his shoulder and a nasty mindset. That being said, Powers has average play strength and limited athleticism and plays with an inconsistent base. So I watched the Oklahoma game versus Alabama in the playoffs. Obviously, that's the game you want to go to if you're trying to assess just how talented these Oklahoma offensive linemen are, because that was by far and away the most talented front they had seen all season long. So you want to see what they do against guys that they're going to see, the caliber of guys they're going to see at the next level, because Alabama's front seven pretty much an NFL front seven. So you want to see just how they fare in situations like that. And I thought that at times he was overmatched, overpowered, outquicked, all of the things you expect. Now, Quinnen Williams, again, I almost hate matching him up, because even guys at the next level that you see on a week out basis aren't going to be Quinnen Williams. Like, he's different. He's elite. So I almost feel bad taking an offensive lineman and asking him to put on great tape against Quinnen Williams. That being said, other guys that he was trying to block, I thought he actually did a good job, against Bugs and some of these other guys, Jennings, some of these other guys, blitzers from the backer position. Thought he did a good job against some of those guys, but he really struggled against Quinnen Williams. On one play, Williams literally took him with a one-arm stab and just put him on his ass. And that's when you see the inconsistent base. Sometimes his feet are too narrow. Sometimes they're too wide. Sometimes they're just right, And so there's some things he has to clean up. Obviously, he can't afford a misstep because he's not athletically gifted enough to rebound if he misses early on in the rep. So if a guy beats him off the snap with the swim move, he's beat. Like, he's not getting back into the play and salvaging that rep. He's beat. And I saw him get beat several times on that particular game. But then you watch him in other games with less athletically gifted offensive line or defensive lineman, and he dominates. So I've got my questions about Ben Powers, but nonetheless, he ducks his head upon contact at times. Saw him miss on a swim move because he ducked his head, preparing himself for contact. He ducked his head, and the guy just swim moved him and went right by him, and can't recover once beaten. While the athleticism simply isn't there, Powers' grit and physicality coupled with experience in both guard spots can't be ignored as at least quality depth. So is he a starter? I don't know. He may be able to start at the NFL and do a bang-up job. He doesn't have to be a Pro Bowler to start at the next level. We've seen plenty of guys be position fillers, do their job, and go home. And they don't hurt you in the run game. They don't hurt you in the pass game. They're just solid. And maybe that's what Ben Powers is. Maybe Ben Powers comes in, gets some great coaching, is able to learn a little bit, and he comes in and he lights it up for this Ravens football team, and all of a sudden you found your guard, left guard, right guard of the future. I think he's a backup. That's how I view Ben Powers, but again, I think he's going to get a chance to come in and compete. I think there is an opening on this Ravens offensive line at left guard, and I think he'll have a chance to compete, or is it right guard? I get my guard positions mixed up. Whichever one Marshall Yanda is not at, I think he'll have a opportunity to compete. I think Marshall Yanda is at right guard, so I think the left guard position is the one that's available. Either way, and I think that's the one right next, if I'm not mistaken, to his ex-teammate at Oklahoma in Orlando Brown. So that'd be a great spot for him if Ben Powers is up to the task. He could be penciled in at left guard right next to his ex-college teammate. So, or is it right guard? Excuse me, right guard next to his college teammate at right tackle. Your left tackle is the ex-Notre Dame Fighting Irish, the Golden Domer, Ronnie Stanley. Let me not F up my man, Ronnie. My fault, Ronnie. So this Ravens offensive line rounding into shape, maybe Ben Powers is the missing piece to the equation. I'm not sold. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not sold that he is, in fact, the missing piece. But I've been wrong before. I could be wrong again. We shall see. Nonetheless, 4th round, 123rd overall selection, offensive guard out of Oklahoma. Ben Powers, for me, is... So now, and in case you were wondering, the last two comps. So my comp for Justice Hill is Jamal Charles. I think he's got every bit of ounce of speed that Jamal Charles had. Remember, Jamal Charles just retired, I think 2 months ago, last month with the Chiefs, signed a one-day contract, retired as a Chief. And I think if I'm not mistaken, he ended his career the all-time yards per carry leader in his career. I think he averaged like 6.7 yards per carry or something like that in his career. The guy was dynamic is what I'm trying to say to you. I think Justice Hill has every bit of that in him as well. And Ben Powers, for me, his comp is Laken Tomlinson. If you remember Laken Tomlinson, he was a guy drafted in the 1st round by the Detroit Lions out of Duke. It didn't fare well for him early on in Detroit. He was then traded to San Francisco, where he got a new lease on life. He's played well when healthy. He's been good and a really good serviceable starter for the San Francisco 49ers. I think the same thing can be said potentially of Ben Powers. I don't necessarily love him, but I think he could actually be a starter in this league. I see him as a backup right now, but I think he could grow into a starter's role, and maybe he takes off. Maybe he gets into that Ravens facility, gets a couple of pointers here or there, cleans up a few things, and next thing you know, Ben Powers is ready to kick ass for this Ravens offensive line. Nonetheless, another 4th round pick here for the Ravens. They did some serious damage in the mid-rounds, 3rd through 5th. And here's another guy here in the 4th round, 127th pick overall. Defensive back out of USC, Amon Lewis Marshall is the selection. All right, so I'm just going to tell you right off the bat, this is a guy that I probably like more than most. And I'm not afraid to tell you when I really like a guy, I really like this guy. So the grade's going to be a little bit higher than maybe other people have him pegged as. A lot of people want to move this guy to safety. I'm like, why? I mean, I think he can play corner. He hasn't shown me that he can't play corner. So until he shows me he can't, I'm going to let him play the cornerback position. As a matter of fact, he strikes me as a guy that you already have. He's eerily similar to a guy you already have on the roster. And so I'm anxious to see this guy get an opportunity. Obviously, as a 4th round pick, you expect him to make the football team. He's going to make this roster. Just as what? Does he come in, help you at the safety position? Does he make that positional switch? Or is he going to get a chance to play corner? If I'm the Ravens, I'm going to give him every opportunity to prove to me that he can play corner until he can't. And then I'll make the switch to safety. But right now, I like Amon Lewis Marshall as a cornerback. Here's why. 6'1", 207 pounds. not a blazer, okay? Not elite top-end speed at 4.53, 40, but again, he makes up for it with some of the other attributes that he brings to the table. So here's my breakdown of him quickly. A versatile cornerback who played and flourished in multiple techniques. Can play press, which I like him the best in press coverage. He didn't necessarily put his hands on the receiver, but just the fact that he's up in the face and deleting the airspace with that receiver to take away the easy underneath throws. I like that. I hate when guys are off and soft, giving up easy underneath throws. He's a guy that won't stand for that. He's in the hip pocket of that receiver who wants to run that slant. He's right there looking to knock it away. Press and bail, seen him play that and play it effectively. Cover two, again, he's a physical corner. Even though he doesn't necessarily always put his hands on the receiver, he's a physical guy. You see it when he comes up to tackle. That's why a lot of people like him at the safety position, because they know he's physical enough to get it done at the safety position, which I also love at the cornerback position. Just because a guy's physical and ready to mix it up doesn't mean he has to move to safety. If the guy has the talent necessary, I think he can get it done at the cornerback position. But even if you were to move him to safety, I think that his skills would translate beautifully to the safety position. And he can play cover 3 and cover 4, which are standard coverages that you see in college football. Nonetheless, but he is at his best when he challenges receivers at the line of scrimmage, as I just mentioned. Will tackle, does a great job of sniffing out wide receiver screens. I can't tell you how frustrated I get with some of these corners that see it but fail to react fast enough, allow that receiver from the slot to come over and block them. And you're just like, dude, you see wide receiver screen coming. Get in there and break the thing up. Get in there and tackle this receiver for a 3-yard loss. All right, they're giving you an opportunity. The best corner I've seen in the league do that, Kendall Fuller of the Kansas City Chiefs, once Washington Redskin. That guy used to blow up every wide receiver screen. I loved it. And at one point, you're like, man, he's going to pick one of these damn things off if one of these quarterbacks isn't careful. I see the same thing in Amon Lewis Marshall, a guy that is all over wide receiver screen. Before that blocker can get over there and make his presence felt, he's already tracking that receiver. And that's what happens when you come up close to the line of scrimmage and delete. When you're playing 7 yards off, you're playing 5 yards off, they run that screen, that receiver's going to come over there and he's going to block your ass. That tight end's going to come over there, he's going to block your ass. Or that big-ass 337-pound tackle is going to come out there and kick your ass out of there. And now all of a sudden, that tunnel screen looks mighty juicy. That lane looks mighty wide. You playing up close to the line of scrimmage, he can't get there in time. Now you're in the backfield. Now you're sniffing that thing out. Now you're making a tackle for loss. And that's what you saw from Amon Lewis Marshall. And also has the ball skills necessary to make plays, 6 career INTs, although all 6 of them came in his first 2 years on the campus of SC in 15 and 16. He locates the ball in flight, so he's a guy that does look for the ball. You know how I am about my corners. You got to be an LLCer. For those of you unfamiliar with my terminology, look, locate, contest. If you're not an LLCer, you do not fit my criteria, and you do not have the prerequisite necessary to be a big-time corner at the next level. You may be a solid corner. You won't be a big-time playmaker at the next level if you're not an LLCer. Amon Lewis Marshall is. And although he doesn't have elite top-end speed, stays in phase with receivers and recognizes route concepts very well. So what I've just said to you is, this is a complete corner. Now, again, doesn't have the top-end speed, but he's a complete corner. All right? Similar to Rock Ya-Sin, who went in the second round to the Indianapolis Colts. This guy plays with an edge. He's physical. Rock Ya-Sin doesn't have top-end speed, but I loved him. Why? Because of this physicality, because he looked back for the football, because he had ball skills, because he wasn't afraid to tackle and he was fearless and he would come in up to the line of scrimmage and delete the airspace and make guys uncomfortable and disrupt the timing of routes. These are all things Amon Lewis Marshall does as well. And so, yeah, you move him to safety and you ask him to drop over the slot and run with these tight ends. He's going to be able to do that very well. But you know what else I think he can do very well? Run with these damn wide receivers. You can find somebody else to run with these damn tight ends. I need guys that can run with wide receivers. I need guys that can play with these wide receivers. I think Amon Lewis Marshall can do that. Now, I may think he can do it more so than the next guy, and that's fine. But I'm not going to feel bad for feeling good about this guy. You know who his comp is for me? His comp is Jimmy Smith. He looks like Jimmy Smith. He plays like Jimmy Smith. Jimmy's a little bit faster. Jimmy's a little bit longer. But I get Jimmy Smith vibes watching this dude. And I think that's why you drafted him here in the 4th round, because you too get Jimmy Smith vibes. And I think that's what Eric DeCosta and his scouts and his guys saw in Amon Lewis Marshall, and that's why they pulled the trigger in the 4th round. And I'm here to tell you, I like the pick here in the 4th round. Let's take the cornerback position off the board, and then I'm going to give you the score, the grade for Amon Lewis Marshall in the 4th round, 127th pick overall. Cornerback, defensive back. Let's call him a defensive back because we don't know what position he's going to play at the next level. Defensive back Amon Lewis Marshall for me is So we move on to the 5th round, 160th pick overall. Defensive lineman out of Texas A&M, Jalen Mack is the selection. So, 5th round, 160th pick, Jalen Mack, 6'1", 336, 31-inch arms. He's an intriguing pick here. He's depth, obviously, but he's going to make this football team. Now, there's a guy that you got undrafted out of Miami named Gerald Willis that is a baller. How he went undrafted, don't ask me. Everybody else's loss is your game. Now, he's going to be a guy that I think you need to watch to potentially make your roster. And I talked about that on my podcast again. If you're not watching the podcast, what are you doing? Louie Tee Network podcast. But I talked about him as one of the surprises along the defensive line that wasn't drafted. And he went to the Baltimore Ravens. And I think he's got a great shot at making their roster. Well, that doesn't bode well for a guy like Jalen Mack. But Mack is a different type of player. You know, he's more of a nose. Someone to eat up space. Willis is a guy that has some size on him. But I think he's more of a... I think you could easily make him a 5-tech. But in any event, wide body, stout defender with more juice than given credit for. Comes off the snap low and forceful with initial burst, but usually not sustained throughout the rep. Has some quickness off the snap with a nice swim move that can be problematic for unsuspecting offensive linemen. Shorter arms makes Mack an easier target to sustain against, especially when he's tired. So when I saw a fresh, engaged Jalen Mack, he was tough to deal with initially off the snap. All right, now he comes up, again, he's 6'1", so he's already got a low center of gravity, so he comes off the snap very low. I like that. That initially gives him a little bit of a boost, and it drives that guard or that center back a yard or two. Then generally that guy, that offensive lineman, guard, center, whomever, usually gains his footing and is able to anchor down versus Jalen Mack. I didn't see him enough times be able to take that initial surge that he gets off the line of scrimmage and parlay that into collapsing the pocket entirely and trying to get to the quarterback, flushing him out of the pocket, getting to the quarterback, that sort of thing. But what I also did see, though, was a guy that would be able to win off the snap with a quick swim, get in the backfield and disrupt. I did see a guy that could get to the quarterback, and that's why I said he's got a little bit more juice than people gave him credit for. So here's his trajectory in his college career. Here's a guy that seldomly saw the field in his first 2 years on the campus of Texas A&M. Got an opportunity to play in 2017. And towards the end of the season, started to get more playing time. He parlayed that opportunity into a little bit of success. And that gave him an opportunity to start in 2018. He made the most of it. Career high 5.5 sacks, some tackles for loss. And that got him drafted. At one point, this guy looked like he wasn't going to be a draftable football player, but because of the work he put in 2018, he reinvented himself, he got better, and got an opportunity. And sometimes for guys, that's all they ever could ask for, and that's all they needed was an opportunity. And he got one, he took advantage of it, and here he is in the 5th round. I actually think he's got a little bit more juice than people give him credit for. Those 5.5 sacks, those weren't fall into the quarterback, coverage sacks, gimme sacks. This is a guy that can win off the initial snap. And I saw another 2 sacks that he could have had, but he hesitated. He wasn't sure if the quarterback still had the ball or the running back had the ball, and he could have had another sack or 2. So I see this guy making his Ravens roster, and I see this guy being a rotational depth guy along your defensive line. My comp for him is Justin Jelly Ellis. And remember, Justin Ellis was a guy out of Louisiana Tech that the Raiders drafted. and he was more of a run stuffer, not going to get to the quarterback. I think that Jalen Mack looks eerily similar to Jelly Ellis, same frame, same type of abilities, but I think this guy has more abilities than Jelly Ellis to get to the quarterback. So I like Jalen Mack a little bit in the 5th round, 160th overall selection. Defensive lineman out of Texas A&M, Jalen Mack for me is So we wrap up this Ravens draft in the 6th round, 197th pick overall. Quarterback out of Penn State, Trace McSorley is the selection. So I had to offer up a double O on my podcast because all process long, I told anybody that asked me, anybody that would listen to me, anybody within earshot, that Trace McSorley was among a group of about 5 quarterbacks that wasn't getting drafted. Stop asking me about Trace McSorley. Stop asking me about Gardner Minshew. Stop asking me about Easton Stick. Don't ask me about these guys. They're not getting drafted. All 3 of them got drafted. So, but I did throw in a caveat at the end. I said there are about 9 quarterbacks, 10 if you want to throw in Trace McSorley, that are draftable. So I did kind of make an amendment to that statement, but I was still dismissive of Trace McSorley. I didn't think he was going to get drafted, honestly. So I had to offer up a double O. Okay, I was wrong. All right, so I had to offer up a double O. I had to eat a little bit of crow. That's fine. I told you, when I'm right, God damn it, you're going to know I'm right because I'll be the first one to tell you I'm right. But when I'm wrong, ditto. I'll be the first one to tell you I was wrong. And I was wrong about Trace McSorley. And I love the fit here in Baltimore. Let me tell you a quick story. So I was at work the other day, and I ran into an ex-coworker, and he's a massive Baltimore Ravens fan. And he was excited about the draft, and he's like, man, we got this guy, and we got that guy. And I was talking about some of the free agent acquisitions that you just made, including Michael Floyd at the receiver position, and Shane Ray. And so we were talking back and forth, and he's like, you know what, though? Trace McSorley in the 6th round, watch him become our backup quarterback. Robert Griffin III is going to be here one more year, and then his ass is out of here. McSorley's taking over as a backup. I said, really? You think so? He said, I'm telling you, I know so. We're getting rid of Robert Griffin III. We're not going to be carrying 3 quarterbacks for too much longer. And you know what? I hadn't thought about that. That didn't even entertain my mind because I said Robert Griffin III is the perfect backup to Lamar Jackson. Their games are eerily similar. They have a similar body type. They have a similar skill set. Everything about Robert Griffin III screams a lesser version of Lamar Jackson. So in my mind, I said, this is the perfect backup quarterback. But then I think about it and I look at Trace McSorley, and there's just something about Trace McSorley. 1, he's a winner. 2, he's a hell of an athlete. Ran the fastest time at the combine of any quarterback, 4.57. And there's just the intangibles that you gotta love about Trace McSorley. He's a local kid. He's not from Baltimore, but he's from the DMV area, so close enough. And so this is a guy that I don't love him as a quarterback. I've already told you that. I've talked about this profusely. I talked about my comp for him being Colt McCoy. I've said that numerous times. I'm not a huge Colt McCoy fan, even though he's a Washington Redskin, and I'm a Washington Redskins fan. But I see a lot of Colt McCoy in him. I see a lot of things that I like with Trace McSorley. Obviously, the guy, I just mentioned this, the guy's a winner. And it's by any means necessary. He just finds a way to get it done. It's not always pretty. It's not always conventional, but it's winning football. And that's what the Ravens are. They're a winning organization. Say what you want about the Ravens. They're unconventional. Who else is running the football with their quarterback 27 times in one game? Who else is doing it? They're unconventional. Who else is playing the brand of football that the Ravens have essentially dedicated themselves to by drafting a guy like Trace McSorley and drafting all the players that they have around Lamar Jackson? Who else is dedicating to themselves to a style of play like the Ravens are and saying, look, this is Ravens football. This is how we're going to win football games. Not many organizations are willing to go all in behind a guy that they draft in the 1st round, but this Ravens organization has done that, and they can have a formation. And I've heard John Harbaugh, and I don't believe this to be the case, but he said, look, we can have a formation where we have 3 quarterbacks on the field. I don't know the benefit to that unless you're going to try a play where Lamar Jackson starts out under center and Robert Griffin III is flanked out on one side and McSorley's on the other side, and then you run a reverse or you have Griffin come in motion and you toss him the football and then he tosses it to McSorley who's coming the opposite way and then you throw a pass. Unless you got some kind of crazy play to dial up, I don't understand the logic behind having 3 quarterbacks on the field at once. But the fact that you can even do that with the athletes that you have at the quarterback position, it's insane. And so this guy fits what the Ravens are right now. This guy fits into the mindset. And let's be honest. This is what the Ravens do. Like, we've seen the Ravens do this before. Remember they took the quarterback out of Navy? All right, tried to convert him to a punt returner and all of that good stuff. They do this. They take late round flyers on guys that are quarterbacks, that are athletes, that deserve a chance in the league, that no other team may give a chance to. And they say, you know what? You've earned the right to play in the league and hear your name called on draft day, so we're going to turn the card in with your name on it. And they did it here with Trace McSorley. They've done it before in the past. They're doing it again here. And this is a solid pickup. Like I said, he fits what the Ravens do. And in the case of an emergency, because Robert Griffin III is very brittle. We've seen that throughout his career. We saw Lamar Jackson go down a couple of times. It was brief, but we know Lamar Jackson with his style of play easily could get a concussion in one game, not come back. Robert Griffin III, we know that he could easily get tapped on the helmet and be out for any amount of time. And it's good to know that Trace McSorley could come in and if need be in a pinch, find a way to get it done because that's what he's done throughout his career. Find ways to get it done. And so to wrap up this Ravens draft in the 6th round, 197th pick overall, quarterback out of Penn State, Trace McSorley, for me is so I don't love Trace McSorley as a passer. I don't, but that doesn't mean he can't develop and get even better. And that doesn't mean he won't fit perfectly into this Ravens scheme, which I think he will fit perfectly into like hand in glove. So this is a good spot for him. Much like I felt with some of these other draft picks, it's a great landing destination for a lot of these players. This is a great landing destination for Justice Hill. Don't have to be the guy. All right, he's behind Ingram, and he's going to get some snaps, but he's going to be a great change of pace. You look at Myles Boykin. I talked about him not being ready to be anybody's number 1 wide receiver, but he's not going to be asked to be that in Baltimore. He's going to be a complementary piece on an offense that's dynamic with a bunch of tight ends, Marquise Brown, Willie Snead, well, some backs that are very capable, and then he's in the mix. So how can you not love what the Ravens did? They sprinkled in a little bit of defense, a corner that I like probably better than most and more than most in Amon Lewis Marshall in the 4th round. Jalen Ferguson, who I think is going to be a quintessential Baltimore Raven in the 3rd round. Did some really quality stuff here in this draft, man. I thought this was a fantastic first draft by new Ravens general manager, Eric DeCosta. The only thing I thought you could have done was draft a linebacker. I thought that there was a need at inside backer, a void left by C.J. Mosley. Again, I think you're really confident in the abilities of Patrick Owasso, who showed you that he can get it done. I'm not so much sold on Kenny Young, but I think you are sold on Kenny Young. That's why you didn't make a move here. And so we'll see what the linebacker position looks like for you moving forward. But I thought that was the one position, if any, that you could have addressed that you didn't in this draft. But okay, I'm cool with it because the players that you got in this draft, top-notch A1 selections by this Ravens organization as you take a look at the Ravens score from their 2019 NFL Haul. So that's going to do it for me, your man Louie Tee. Remember, if it's not your man T, it's not the best NFL coverage. It could be. Also, make sure you subscribe to the Louie Tee Network if you haven't already done so. Check out the Louie Tee Network podcast available on Stitcher, Google Music Play, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, and of course the website LouieTeeNetwork.net. I'm your man Louie Tee signing off. Remember, more great content where this came from. So make sure you subscribe to the Louie Tee Network as I cover all 32 teams in the National Football League. Until next time, have a good one.
Louie Tee Network.